Hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
If a recession is what it takes to make Donald Trump not so cute anymore, then bring it on. Just think of this as sanctions against ourselves. Although, again, I can't really make a recession happen, even with my 100 million.
I have not called for the harm of anybody. This president has lied again.
In a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station.
I have no intention of pretending everything's all right.
You tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
I strongly disagree with those who advocate harassing folks if they don't agree with you.
God is on our side.
No one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American.
This president will try to do everything to divert our attention.
This is a descent of America into tribalism, and this is dangerous.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast live of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation today. We are stacked and packed and locked and loaded. So when we get started, buckle up because it is going to be a fast ride. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but it's going to be a good ride. In fact, we have got a lot. I've got at least 4, count them, Winnable War moments to celebrate today. So this is a great day to be a conservative in America, and I will tell you why right after the first break.
I think I'm going to request that they start putting seatbelts in the studio here for us.
We better do it. And you better have a seatbelt at home.
Airbags,
and
everything.
your Barcalounger, if you're driving in your car, make sure you got that shoulder belt on because it is going to be a fast ride. Now, I want to turn our attention to the Word of God. We are in Isaiah chapter 10. We're in a section where Isaiah is talking about the threat that the nation and the armies of Assyria posed to Israel. And what we learn something about here is something about God's discipline on nations, including his discipline on the United States. And we learn something about his discipline in our own lives. So if we are suffering right now because of our own disobedience, something we have brought on ourselves, then God has a word for us in this passage because that counts as God's discipline as well. Now, Israel at this time was facing a direct threat from the nation of Assyria and its mighty army. And what we learn here is that God has a purpose for nations who were the enemies of Israel, and he has a purpose for those nations and those peoples who are enemies of ours. And the purpose that God has is to use their might to discipline us, to use their power as a rod in his hands to discipline a nation that has rejected God after embracing him. Does that sound familiar? Does that sound like a nation that you know? Here's what it says in verse 5. Woe to Assyria, God is speaking, the rod of my anger. The staff in their hands is my fury. Against a godless nation, that would be Israel, that would be the United States, have I sent him. And against the people of my wrath, that's a nation that's turned its back on God, I command him to take spoil and seize plunder. Now, the godless nation here that God is speaking about is Israel. He says about Israel that this wrath is coming on my own chosen people. The word godless here, this godless nation in Hebrew, it means polluted or profane. The root means to incline away from what is right. So that's what Israel was doing in Isaiah's day. It's doing what we are doing in our day. There's no question that we as a nation have become polluted and profane and are inclining away from God and away from what is right. You want to figure out if we're profane and polluted or not, Just turn in some night to late night TV or listen to the language of the angry left to realize how profane we have become and how little inclination there is in public toward righteousness. All the leaning, all the drift we see in our culture today is away from what is right and holy and just and good. And so we are justly deserving of God's wrath, just as Israel was in Isaiah's day. I would suggest that just as Assyria was the rod of God's anger, just as the staff in their hands was God's fury, so I would suggest that the jihadists of Islam who struck us on 9/11 were the rod of God's anger. They were the staff in their hands was God's fury against a godless nation, a nation that increasingly is inclining away from him. Now, Assyria didn't even know that they were simply a tool in God's hand. They weren't interested in serving God's purposes at all. They weren't interested in disciplining the people of God. They were interested in destroying them and plundering them. They just wanted to obliterate everything in their path. Verse 7 says, he does not so intend, referring to Assyria, and his heart does not so think, but it is in his heart to destroy, not to discipline, but to destroy and to cut off nations, not a few. But Isaiah makes it clear that when their work of disciplining the nation is done, when they have accomplished the task for which he sent them, he will in turn punish that nation, the people who have attacked them, have attacked us. Verse 12, when the Lord has finished all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem through the armies of Assyria, he will punish the speech, literally the fruit, of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the boastful look in his eyes. There's no question that the king of Assyria was boastful. God quotes the king in verse 13, by the strength of my hand I have done it, and by my wisdom, for I have understanding. He thought he was in charge. He had no idea that he was just a tool in the hands of a sovereign God, just as the Muslim jihadis of today are boastful. In fact, he uses the language of someone robbing a nest of eggs that have been abandoned by the mother bird. Verse 14, my hand has found like a nest the wealth of the peoples, and as one gathers eggs that have been forsaken, so I have gathered all the earth. But he reminds us here that our enemies, no matter what kind of success they have against us, are simply tools in his toolbox that he picks up and uses for his purpose, something the nations simply do not understand. He says this in verse 15, shall the axe, those are the Muslim jihadis, that's the king of Assyria, shall the axe boast over him who hews with it? That's God. He's the lumberjack, they're just the axe. Or the saw magnify itself against him who wields it. God's the carpenter, they're just the saw, as if a rod should wield him who lifts it, or as if a staff should lift him who is not wood. That'd be like something out of a Disney cartoon if an axe started throwing the lumberjack around, or a saw started swinging a carpenter around. So Isaiah promises that God in his time will discipline those who have disciplined us. Be not afraid of the Assyrians when they strike with the rod and lift up their staff against you, for in a very little while my fury will come to an end, and my anger will be directed to their destruction, and the Lord of hosts will wield against them his whip. Well, let's go to prayer. Lord, we worship you this day as the Lord Almighty, the Mighty One of Israel. You are the Light of Israel and the Holy One of Israel. You have all power in heaven and on earth. You are able to fell the lofty trees and cut down the forest thickets with an axe. No power on earth can resist you and your purpose. You brought the Assyrian king against Judah and used him as the rod of your anger and the club of your wrath to chastise your people for their rebellion against you. I pray for us today, Lord, any of us who may in some similar way be experiencing the consequences of our own sin. I pray that you will finish your work of discipline in our lives so that your anger against us may soon end. I pray that through your correction we will no longer rely on man, but truly rely upon you. I pray that we will choose this day to rely upon you rather than upon the strength of our own hands. Pray this day for my nation. We acknowledge that you have used our enemies as the rod of your anger, but we ask in your time that you will destroy the enemies of our people. In Jesus' name.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, we only go to the Holy Land once a year, and that's in March. Last year, we filled up several months in advance. So if you want to go in March of 2019, it's time to look at the details. You can get a brochure from us at 800-FAMILIES, 1-800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your telephone number, or go to twholyland.com, twholyland.com. It's going to be a wonderful time in Israel. We'll go to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the holy city of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Masada, the Dead Sea, and on the list goes. If you'd like to go with us in March of 2019, all the information is available at twholyland.com. Order a brochure by calling 800-FAMILIES, option 5.
Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. The ACLU has released new national case selection guidelines. The guidelines state, though they formerly functioned as a fighter for the First Amendment and other civil rights, from now on, they will only defend cases that are consistent with their organizational values. Translation, they aren't a principled defender of constitutional rights. They're a partisan, regressive, ideologically driven hack outfit confirming in writing what we've really known for quite some time now, based on their actions.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. As I mentioned, we're going to start on an uptick today because there are 4, count them, 4 significant Winnable War moments that we are going to celebrate together today.
That's a good day.
And when you hear the home run call of the San Francisco Giants, by the way, this shows you how hard I work. I do this for you because I care for you as my listening audience. I listen to the home run call of every home run that the San Francisco Giants hit in 2016. And I picked the best of those to use as our alert that a Winnable War moment is on the way.
You kind of had us worried there, Robin. I had to go into your office and push you with a broomstick, knock you away from the screen. You were so tranced into that thing.
It was like 14 minutes and 46 seconds of home run calls, and I sacrificed for you, lady. Yeah. I forced myself to sit through that whole 15-minute tape for you.
Let me bring a little reality. You had to go to 2016 to get these calls?
No, it's just that's just 1 year. You could have done it for any year. All right, Lynn. That's what it's like to work with my team here. Yeah, he had to do it. Rob, just like somebody put a gun at his head.
That's right.
And made him take a poke at me. Anyway, let's just hit R1 there.
He hits it high. He hits it deep. It is out of here.
All right. That's the first sign of our first Winnable War moment, and I'm going to pick the Winnable War moment on the abortion issue. Now, California had passed a law that required abortion clinics, crisis pregnancy centers, that required them to post information about where they could get abortions. And they were required to do it even though they were fiercely pro-life and strongly anti-abortion. But the Supreme Court ruled today that no, California, you cannot do that. You cannot compel these crisis pregnancy centers to produce speech that violates their own conscience and religious conviction. So this is a huge, huge, huge Winnable War moment. again, some sanity, and this is because I believe of the influence of Neil Gorsuch. I think if you want to trace this back to where this is coming from, it goes right back to Neil Gorsuch, because this guy has such a strong conservative presence on the court that I think he's kind of pulling the court to the right, back toward the Constitution, because you got regressives and want to pull us away from the Constitution. You got those on the Supreme Court just as well. So the Supreme Court today said you cannot force pro-life pregnancy centers to promote abortion. This is another win for our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom. Their president, Michael Ferris, who used to be the head of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, he's the one that argued this case before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, here's an excerpt from Christianity Today. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4. Notice that's a 1-vote margin that we've got on many of these conservative issues. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to block a California law that required pregnancy centers to post referrals. They had to actually post referrals to state-funded abortion providers who also had birth control resources, forcing them to promote services that violated their beliefs. Now, the court ruled that the act, quote, targets speakers, not speech, and imposes an unduly burdensome disclosure requirement that will chill their protected speech. So this wasn't so much a victory for religious liberty as it was for freedom of speech. Makes no difference to us. They're all in the First Amendment. They're all critically important. So this is a big, huge win today from the Supreme Court. Penny Nance said, we applaud. She's with she's the president of Concerned Women for America. We applaud the Supreme Court for sending a clear statement today that pro-life Americans cannot be discriminated against and targeted by government. So anyway, it wasn't even specifically about abortion. It was about freedom of speech. But this is what Mark Rienzi of the Beckett firm, it's a religious liberty law firm, said this: when it comes to important issues, the government doesn't get to tell people what to believe. It also doesn't get to tell people what to say about it. Now, there are 3,000 pregnancy clinics in the United States, crisis pregnancy centers. Almost all of these are run by evangelicals who oppose abortion because of their religious convictions. Now, these centers outnumber abortion clinics about 3 or 4 to 1. Most people don't know that. There are 3 or 4 times as many crisis pregnancy centers, pro-life pregnancy clinics, as there are abortion clinics. Now, the center of this case was about 137 of California's 200 pregnancy centers, and this is a big victory. They do no longer have to post the messages that the state of California said they had to post promoting abortion and the availability of abortion procedures.
What was the vote on that?
5-4.
Okay, that should be a little concerning that 4 people would vote.
Yeah, you got 4 people said, no, we believe we have the right as the government to tell people what to believe and what to say about what's important to us.
So this is kind of confusing. You have one set of standard that's trying to force somebody to do something against their will, as far as Jack Phillips and the rest. In this case, they're saying you have to do something. You have to speak. You have to do something. I don't know. It kind of confuses me.
Well, but the heart of it in both cases, either case, is compulsion. You can either be compelled to say something that violates your conscience, or you can be forbidden to say something that expresses your conscience. Here's what Clarence Thomas, who wrote the majority opinion, quote, it imposes a government-scripted, speaker-based disclosure requirement that is wholly disconnected from the state's informational interest. Point of that is the First Amendment says you can't do what they were trying to do, that is compel speakers to give a certain message. So the ones who voted the 5-4, it's Clarence Thomas, it was John Roberts, Anthony Kennedy, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, and then you had the standard regressives over on the other side, the Sonia Sotomayors and the Stephen Breyers and the Ruth Bader Ginsburgs, all voting that, yes, you can be compelled to say what we tell you to say. That's just tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. You want to put a word on that, that is just tyranny.
Yeah.
And whether it comes from the Supreme Court compelling you to do something or the state of California, that's just tyranny. So this is bigger than just abortion. Although it's the most important cultural issue. This is about tyranny and the effort of the government in the state of California to tyrannize, to impose tyranny on its citizens. So naturally, the California leaders are out there just absolutely blasting this thing. But, it doesn't matter. They can bloviate and they can rage and they can froth at the mouth all they want. But this is the Supreme Court. And remember, they're the ones that say, hey, when the Supreme Court rules, that's the law of the land. That's right. No more discussion, no more debate, no more protest. This is the law of the land. So we'll see how long that lasts in this case. So anyway, that is just terrific news. That's Winnable War moment number 1. We've got another one, Rob. Let's go to R3.
He hits it high. He hits it deep. It is out of here. He's done it again.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's our cue. Another Winnable War moment coming your way. He's done it again. We got another one. We got number 2 here. And this one, we got 4 of them to pick from. The next one I'm going to pick is the Supreme Court. No. This is the one that's more important than that one. Barronelle Stutzman, we talked about her when it happened. She's in Washington. She's a florist in the state of Washington. And similar to Jack Phillips in the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, she had 2 homosexuals who were customers of hers. And she liked them. And they liked her. They got along great. She provided a lot of floral arrangements for them in the past. So they came in to her floral shop and said, we want you to make a floral arrangement so we can celebrate our homosexual union. Gay marriages weren't legal at that time in the state of Washington. And so they said, we want you to celebrate. She says, no, I can't do it. I'm a Christian. That would violate my most deeply held convictions to do that, so I'm not going to do that. But the state of Washington, I don't know if it was Attorney General. It was actually somebody short of the Attorney General that went after her. Or maybe I'm confusing that with Oregon. But the Attorney General in Washington said to Barronelle Stutzman, we're not just going to sue you, your business for discrimination. We are going to sue you personally. In other words, the state of Washington told Barronelle Stutzman, we're going to come after your bank accounts. We're going to come after your retirement pensions. We are going to come after your house. We are going to come after your possessions if we have to get from you our pound of flesh, because we believe that what you've done is absolutely horrendous. Well, the reality is the horrendous thing that was done is the state of Washington was discriminating against Barronelle Stutzman and discriminating against her on the basis of religious values. And remember, the law, this is Title IX, it forbids any kind of discrimination in business practices on the basis of religion. You simply cannot discriminate against people based on religion. So it was the state of Washington that was in violation of the law. Here's what Kristen Wagoner, she was the head lead attorney for ADF. Again, this is another huge win. I think this is their 9th win before the Supreme Court, Alliance Defending Freedom. She said this, while the Attorney General failed to prosecute a business that obscenely berated and discriminated against Christian customers, that was another business, he has steadfastly pursued unprecedented measures to punish Barronelle, not just in her capacity as a business owner, but also in her personal capacity. In the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling, the Supreme Court condemned that sort of one-sided discriminatory application of the law against people of faith. And the Attorney General has repeatedly and overtly demeaned her faith. He has compared her religious beliefs about marriage to racial discrimination. This is a direct conflict with the Supreme Court's recognition in Masterpiece Cake Shop that it was inappropriate for the government to draw parallels between those religious beliefs and defenses of slavery. So that's what the Supreme Court said. In fact, they found for Jack Phillips because they saw that there was obvious animus and bias and hostility on the part of California officials against people, or Colorado officials, than the same in Washington.
This is Dr. Richard Land, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. The Southern Baptist Convention meets once a year. This year it met in Dallas, Texas, and it passes resolutions. This year they passed a resolution on reaffirming the full dignity of every human being. The resolution says, "In the beginning, the triune God chose to create humanity in his image and according to his likeness, such that God created man in his own image. He created them male and female. God judged his creation of humanity to be very good indeed, crowned humanity with honor and glory, making them rulers over the works of his hands, and put eternity in all human hearts, so we might seek after him." They go on to say, God's precious likeness and image was passed down from Adam to his posterity, the human race, through generations. God sent his own perfect image, Jesus Christ, into the world, intending through the sufferings of Christ for human beings to become conformed, renewed, and transformed into the same image of Christ. God intends to bless human beings to bear the image of the man of heaven, Jesus Christ, and wants everyone to be saved through hearing and believing his gospel. The Baptist Faith and Message clearly affirms that human dignity is an inviolable status, stating, quote, "The sacredness of human personality is evident in that God created man in his own image, and in that Christ died for man. Therefore, every person of every race possesses full dignity and worth, and is worthy of respect and Christian love." And so, the convention affirmed the full dignity of every unborn child and denounces every act of abortion except to save the mother's physical life, and affirms the full dignity of every human being of whatever ethnicity, and denounce every form and practice of racism and ethnocentrism. This is a profound statement. I encourage all of you to read it. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name, congenial, convivial, and amiable as always. And we are rehearsing. I mean, this is a day of celebration. We're just calling this Winnable War Tuesday on Focal Point. We have four, count them, four victories to celebrate. Four winnable war moments. There's actually more of them, but we got four biggies. First two we've been talking about is the win on abortion at the Supreme Court. Remember, state of California trying to compel crisis pregnancy centers run by evangelical Christians and by Roman Catholics, try to compel them to promote abortion services. And they refuse to do it. We're not going to do it. It violates our conscience. Supreme Court upheld their right. They cannot be compelled to produce speech that's contrary to their religious values. That's a huge win. And it was based on freedom of speech, not just freedom of religion, although both would apply. You know, and the whole point of freedom of speech, this has to do with political issues. That's the whole point of the protection for free speech, is it's speech about politics. That's what they were trying to protect. It wasn't they weren't trying to protect profanity. They weren't trying to protect pornography. It's been completely misconstrued, been mangled all out of what it originally meant by the founders, where it's fine, you know, pornography and profanity find protection on the First Amendment freedom. That wasn't about that stuff at all. It was about the freedom to express political points of view without being harassed and punished by the government. You publish pornography, you can be harassed and punished by the government. You use profanity, you can be harassed and punished by the government. You've got no First Amendment protection in those cases, according to the founders' Constitution, the Constitution as written. So the first one was a big freedom of speech, freedom of religion win for crisis pregnancy centers. The second one was what happened in Barronelle Stutzman's case. She was the florist who politely declined to produce a floral arrangement for a same-sex ceremony, got taken to court, and the Supreme Court, what they ruled is they didn't rule. What they did is they sent her case back to the Washington State Supreme Court. The Washington State Supreme Court had ruled on behalf of the state. Yes, you can punish her. yes, you can go after her for everything she owns because what she did was a heinous cultural misdeed. This discrimination against these same-sex vendors. But the Supreme Court says you got to review this case in light of the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling. We've issued a ruling in Masterpiece Cake Shop about wedding vendors. You've got to review this case, and you've got to use this Masterpiece Cake Shop as a guide for how you reconsider your ruling. So in essence, the Supreme Court was saying your ruling is bad. You got to revise it. You got to redo it. You got to issue a brand new ruling, and it better comport with the standard that we set in the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling. And again, as we said, what do they say Supreme Court rulings are? The law of the land. So the Washington State Supreme Court, if they believe their own rhetoric, are going to have to accept the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling as the law of the land and then issue a compatible ruling in the case of Barronelle Stutzman. So that's another huge, huge win on this Winnable War Tuesday. All right, that's 3 Winnable Wars. Let's go to Winnable War number 4, clip R4.
Oh, I think we're on 3.
Are we on 3?
Yeah, you had the pregnancy crisis sensors.
I look at R4, clip number R4. I got all confused.
No, that's my fault. That's the way I listed it on the rundown.
Yeah, no, and ladies and gentlemen, we saw this yesterday. Don't believe anything I say if it involves numbers unless I am reading it off a sheet. I couldn't even tell time yesterday. You know, and then they, like I said, they messed around with putting Roman numerals up on our digital clock, and I got totally thrown off. So anyway, this is to introduce our 3rd Winnable War moment.
High drive, right field, it is out of here.
All right, Winnable War moment number 3, nationalreview.com, Supreme Court upholds Trump's travel ban. This was the Muslim travel ban. Well, it was not just Muslim nations. There were 2 other nations that were non-Muslim nations that were also on this travel ban. So technically, you cannot call this a Muslim travel ban. I have no problem calling it a Muslim travel ban because that's really what Trump was aiming at here primarily. But these 5 nations, these 5 Muslim nations, where there's no visas going to be issued to these people to come to the United States for any reason, they were banned because they are hotbeds of jihadist extremism. They're hotbeds of Islamic radicalism, Islamic extremism. They're hotbeds of fundamentalist Islam. And here's Jack Crow's piece on National Review Online. The Supreme Court endorsed the Trump administration's conception of executive power with respect to immigration policy Tuesday, upholding President Trump's ban on travelers from a number of nations deemed heightened security risks. This piece, the majority opinion, was authored by Chief Justice John Roberts, and he wrote that the travel ban, this 3rd time that a travel ban has been put before the Supreme Court, John Roberts ruled that the travel ban is squarely, quote, squarely within the scope of presidential authority. The sole prerequisite set forth in federal law is that if the president finds that the entry of the covered aliens would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, that's word for word, right out of federal law, the president has undoubtedly fulfilled that requirement here. So again, if the Supreme Court ruling is, according to our friends on the left, the law of the land, then all courts now are going to be compelled to acknowledge that the president can ban immigration, travel to the United States from any group of would-be immigrants whom he believes to be detrimental to the interest of the United States. And he gets to decide that all by himself according to the law. He doesn't have to get approval from any government agency. He doesn't have to get sign-off from Congress.
Hawaii.
Or Hawaii, or the little tin pot district judge in Hawaii, or the little tin pot district judge in Washington. He doesn't have to get permission from anybody. He, on his own authority, if he deems, that's the word in the law, if he deems that the entry of any aliens or group of aliens would be detrimental, that's the word in the law, detrimental to the interest of, that's a word-for-word quote, the interest of the United States, then he has the liberty to ban them from entering the country. That's why we have a ban on communists. No communist can travel to the United States. Why? Because they believe in a totalitarian ideology and they harbor animus against the United States. What about fundamentalist Muslims? Fundamentalist Muslims believe and follow a totalitarian ideology. They harbor in their hearts an animus toward the United States of America. When they get the opportunity, they try to channel that animus into action that endangers our national security. So this is a huge win. Winnable War moment number 3. The president can ban immigration from any group of Muslims from any country in the world. So if he believes there's any country in the world that's a hotbed of Islamic extremism or fundamentalism, you know, we had 15 out of the 19 jihadis that hit us on 9/11 were from Saudi Arabia. You want to look for a place that's a hotbed of Islamic extremism, you don't have to look any further than Saudi Arabia. Now, they're not on this ban. But Donald Trump could decide, no, Saudi Arabia represents too big a threat to the United States. We cannot take the chance. And he could ban travel from Saudi Arabia for exactly the same reason. So this is huge now. You know, we had this deal going where you had all these little district judges. And this in part might be why the Supreme Court ruled as it did. A lot of these district judges, that's the lowest level on the judicial totem pole. I mean, they're not appeals court judges. They have authority over a tiny little district in their state. They don't even have authority over the whole state where they're a judge, just a district in their state. That's why they're called U.S. District Court judges. And the idea is that the fact of the matter is that legally they have no authority outside their own jurisdiction. So they can issue rulings that have a binding authority in their own district, but outside their district, they have absolutely zero authority. So a judge in Hawaii has no legal authority to ban immigration or ban Trump's immigration policies and control the immigration policy of the entire country. They don't have the authority to do it. A district judge in San Francisco or a district judge in Washington, likewise, only has authority in his own district. He has no authority to tell the president of the United States what kind of immigration policy he can have. In fact, the fact of the matter is the Supreme Court can't either, if you want to get right down to it, because there's nowhere in the law that it says, okay, the president can ban travel from any group of foreigners he deems detrimental to the interests of the United States as long as the Supreme Court agrees. Doesn't say that. He just says he can do it, period. So not even the Supreme Court legally, constitutionally, has any authority to weigh in on President Trump's immigration policies, and that would include, by the way, policies on the southern border. So anyway, this is a huge win. You know, this is a win for religious liberty because we have a concern about the threat that fundamentalist Islam poses to religious liberty in the United States of America. In fact, I would say that's our number one reason to oppose Islamic immigration is they represent a threat to everything that we hold dear, including our very lives. So that's why we oppose. I oppose Islamic immigration just flatly because I don't know how we can tell the difference between Muslims that mean us harm and Muslims that do not. But if President Trump were to decide, look, we cannot allow the immigration of any followers of Muhammad into this country because for 1,400 years they have been waging bloody, lethal warfare against the West, and that's a true fact. They have, since 630 AD, they have been waging war against the West. They have tried repeatedly to invade Europe and go all the way up to Rome, take control of the entire European continent, then take England, and then come and take the United States. So they represent an existential threat to our freedom, to our liberty, to our constitutional rights, because the Muslim faith does not represent a single right that's enshrined in the First Amendment. Not one single solitary right do Muslim nations honor in their countries. This is not an ideology that we need to have take hold in the United States. So good for the Supreme Court recognizing the president's authority. We'll be right back.
So they asked me to enter my email address, and the next thing I know, I start getting emails from companies I never even knew existed. What's up with that?
Here at the American Family Association, you have our word that we won't give away, sell, or lease your email address to any other organization or company. We're thankful when you take the time to subscribe to AFA Action Alerts, 1 Million Moms, Engage Magazine, or any of our other online newsletters.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
Fighting broke out overnight along the Israeli
Do you sometimes get scared because things are bad? Well, don't. You know why? Because God is a God of hope. In times of war, we hope for peace. Times of turmoil, we hope for stability. When we're lost, we hope for redemption. That hope is good because it points to a reality, just as being thirsty points to the reality of water. A woman in a third world country, when she first heard about Jesus, said, I knew there must be a God like that somewhere. Where do you think she got that hope? She got it from Him, the God of hope. I'm Steve Brown. You think about that. Hey, share what you just heard with a friend. Go to youthinkaboutthat.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Span. High, deep. It is out of here.
Whoa, another signal from my team that it's time for a Winnable War moment. Winnable War moment number 4. Rob, I'm going to have you replay that one, and I'll tell you why I included this one. The home run call wasn't actually all that great, but we saw that home run. The one that's being called in this call, that was Denard Span. We saw him hit this against the New York Mets at AT&T Park when Debbie and I were taking our family to San Francisco for our 40th anniversary celebration. We were there when Denard Span hit this one out, and it was what's called a splash hit.
Yeah.
At that time, it was the 71st splash hit. That's when somebody hits a home run so far over the right field wall, it actually goes into San Francisco Bay. It's called McCovey Cove back there. And when Denard Span hit that one, that was splash hit number 71, and we were there. So, Rob, let's just relive. What's that?
Was it a day game?
That was a day game.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's just relive the moment. You have the opportunity to relive that moment with Debbie and me, with my son and daughter-in-law, and with my daughter and son-in-law. Let's relive the moment.
Span. High, deep. It is out of here.
Now people understand why we had to separate you from the TV screen this morning. You were like in a trance there. We thought maybe you were stuck.
Anyway, we've had 3 Winnable War moments, and I promised you a 4th, and that's coming up. So Winnable War moment number 1 was on abortion clinics. Our crisis pregnancy centers cannot be compelled to promote abortion in their clinics. Big win. It's a win against a pushback against tyranny. Second is Barronelle Stutzman. The Washington State Supreme Court was rebuked by the United States Supreme Court. They sent her case back to the Washington State Supreme Court and says, you got to redo this thing. This is out of phase with the ruling that we issued in the Masterpiece Cake Shop. There's animus all over the stuff that you've got in this. The Attorney General, all kinds of animus and hostility toward Christian faith from the Attorney General of Washington. And remember, the Supreme Court will say, look, that's why we ruled against Colorado, is because there was evident bias and animus against the Christian faith of Jack Phillips. So you got to take this one back under advisement. You've got to retool this thing, make sure it's consistent with the ruling that we issued in the Masterpiece Cake Shop. Then the third Winnable War moment was the upholding of Donald Trump's travel ban. And remember, you had these little district judges, these little tin-pot district judges, had no authority outside their own district. They were presuming to tell the President of the United States what his travel policy, immigration policy could and could not be. And I don't know why the President went along with it. I mean, they got away with it because the President accepted that they could do that to him. I don't know why. I don't know who was counseling him on that. But he had no obligation to listen to what a little district judge. I mean, the people that live in his district, whoever was in his court, I mean, it would apply maybe to them, but it wouldn't apply to anybody outside his district. Anyway, huge win for our effort to defeat Islam. And that's the thing I love about it. It's not just about travel. It's not just about immigration. It is specifically about the President's intention and commitment to protect us from Muslims and Muslim countries who intend us harm. Now, again, we've got to do the caveat. Am I saying that all Muslims represent a threat to us? Absolutely not. A lot of Muslims are very fine, great people, good friends, good neighbors, good members of the community. You know, the problem is that we have no way of telling the difference between a Muslim from whom we have nothing to fear and a Muslim who intends us harm. Remember how time after time after time, when a Muslim in America would go off and kill some people or make a bomb or whatever, you know, we would find quotes from his family. I had no idea he was capable of something like this. And the neighbors would say he was always such a nice boy. I'm just blown away. It's just incomprehensible to me that he would be capable of such a thing. So we just have no way of telling the difference between the ones that we have to worry about and the ones that we don't. So we just have to be careful with them all. Now, Winnable War moment number 4 is a decision by a judge in San Francisco to toss out 2 lawsuits, one by San Francisco and one by Oakland, that tried to blame the world's largest oil companies for climate change and issue some kind of financial penalty against them for causing global warming and emitting too much carbon dioxide. Now, the court said, look, the court believes, William also believes, that we do have a warming planet. We saw yesterday that that's not true. That piece in the Wall Street Journal. Surface temperatures in the United States have not inched up appreciably since the year 2000. No global warming. Even though CO2 emissions continue to go up, temperatures are not. So the judge erroneously says, yeah, we got a problem with a warming planet, but this issue is just too big for the courts to solve. So what the cities were trying to do is they wanted to get Chevron, for instance, and 4 other oil and gas giants to help them cover the costs of dealing with sea level rise. There isn't any sea level rise. I mean, this was absurd from the beginning. There is no detectable sea level rise. I mean, what there is extremely tiny. I can measure it in millimeters or centimeters. So they wanted them to put up these giant sea walls to protect them from this non-existent threat from rising sea levels. And the judge said, look, it's Congress and the White House that are responsible for dealing with environmental issues. It's not the job of the judiciary. Again, so this is a great win for the proper role of the judiciary. You know, so here's a court says, we would like to help you out. We are with you. We agree with you, Oakland and San Francisco, that global warming is a problem. And we agree with you that not enough has been done about it. We might even agree with you that Chevron is partly to blame. But that is not our job to solve that problem. Congress and the White House have to do that. So that's a big win for reining in an out-of-control judiciary. So anyway, that is an absolutely good deal. So anyway, that's a big win for a common sense view of environmentalism. And again, the judge has bought the lies of the radical left that man is causing this catastrophic global warming. There's just simply nothing to it. We've said this before. We'll say it again. I'm going to say it till everybody in America agrees with me. Global warming is a sham, a scam, and a hoax. I repeat, global warming is a sham, a scam, and a hoax. CO2 does not cause catastrophic global warming. It's harmless. It's a harmless gas. In fact, it's the gas of life. Plants cannot exist without carbon dioxide. We are absolutely dependent. You want fresh vegetables and fresh fruits in your dinner table, those trees and plants got to have CO2 or you're going to be eating rocks. So CO2 is plant food. It's not a pollutant. It's not a poison. CO2 is plant food. We depend on it. In fact, if you had a greenhouse and you want your plants to grow faster than they're doing now, you pump CO2 in there, into the tent, and they'll grow like crazy. We did that story several years ago about, they have these two greenhouses there, and you can watch it on tape delay or time lapse photography rather. Where you got these two plants side by side. One's in a closed-in, like a closed-in space, both of them. And in one, they pipe in CO2. So they raise the CO2 level in that little compartment, and you watch that plant just take off. It grows like 200, 300, 400% faster than the plant that's just getting regular air. So CO2 is not a pollutant. It is plant food. Global warming is a sham, scam, and it is a hoax. And at least we got one judge that agrees that this is a problem for Congress and the White House and not for the judiciary.
Just a quick side note, I came across an article today that the lack of CO2 is affecting meat production and beer.
How is it affecting
There's
beer?
a shortage. They use the CO2
for
beer.
the carbonization and
right.
Yeah, so you can't make beer. You don't have you won't have a head. You won't have any suds if you don't have CO2.
And with meat, they use CO2 to help euthanize the animals before they're dressed out or whatever you call it.
Okay, but
slaughtered
before they kill them. Actually,
yeah, they kind of use it to help them knock them out.
Okay, so it's kind of like it puts them to sleep, so then there's no pain when their throats are slit. I worked in a meatpacking plant for a while. I think I've told some of you this, and what we did with the animals, the cows that came in, is we'd put them in what we called the kill chute, and so the animal would be boxed in this kill chute. You drop the gate behind it so it couldn't back down the ramp, and then we had a little thing called a knocker, and it was powered by 22 shells, and we would just reach out and tap the skull of the cow with that little trigger on the knocker, and it would set off that 22 shell, and it would drive a plunger into the skull of the cow and knock it out. It'd be not completely unconscious, so it couldn't feel a thing, and then we'd pull the lever on the door, and the cow would roll out onto the kill floor. They'd string it up by its rear ankles and then slit its throat, and the lifeblood would pour out into the drain there on the kill floor. So apparently they've improved that and now using CO2 to kind of put them to sleep, just like you go to sleep before surgery. So anyway, that's it for the first hour. Again, 4 Winnable War moments on this Winnable War Tuesday. A win on the pro-life issue, a win on the religious liberty issue to stand against the homosexual agenda, a win on our effort to protect this nation from Islamic extremism, and a win to protect this nation from out-of-control environmental extremists.
Span, high, deep, it is out of here!
Winnable War Tuesday. Be right back.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Hello, this is Dr. Ronnie Floyd, President of the National Day of Prayer Task Force. In the Declaration of Independence, our founding fathers acknowledged God. As we celebrate our nation's independence, please remember to pray for our nation and its leaders and ask God for His guidance and continued blessing. A reminder from American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Requirements forcing pro-life pregnancy centers to provide abortion information does not pass a Supreme Court review. Jared Halpern has more.
The Supreme Court says there are First Amendment problems with the California law requiring crisis pregnancy centers to provide information about where to obtain free or low-cost abortions. A 5-4 opinion authored by Justice Clarence Thomas says the requirements target speakers, not speech, and impose an unduly burdensome disclosure requirement. Writing for the liberal minority, Justice Stephen Breyer likened the California requirements with previously upheld laws requiring doctors to tell women seeking abortions about adoption services. In Washington, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The Supreme Court today upheld President Trump's travel ban affecting several mostly Muslim countries. The 5-4 ruling marks the first major high court decision on a Trump administration policy. A conservative blogger and speaker points to several recent instances where Trump officials or supporters have been publicly shamed, including Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, and Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi. Ben Shapiro says California Congresswoman Maxine Waters' reckless call for people to, quote, absolutely harass Trump cabinet officials anywhere they're seen in public is thuggish public bullying and will only harden the political divide in the U.S. and perhaps lead to violence.
I mean, I think that this has been going on for at least a couple of years here. It started on college campuses, obviously. I don't find any of this particularly shocking. I guess I'm just shocked by how much of the mainstream left has decided to endorse it. You have people like Simone Sanders on CNN yesterday saying that it is a part of white privilege to call for civility, and she's not the only one saying that. You saw John Legend yesterday do the same thing on Twitter, where he suggested that calling people out in public places, destroying their ability to have dinner, standing outside their home, and this is all stuff that should happen if you disagree with the policy. And I think this is one of the big problems that we have in our politics right now is everybody assumes that they're being victimized and therefore their reaction is okay.
It's a milestone for medical marijuana, Lillian Wu explains.
It's the first prescription drug made for marijuana to get a green light from U.S. health regulators. The Food and Drug Administration approving Epidiolex for treating seizures in 2 rare and severe forms of childhood epilepsy, but experts expect it'll be prescribed for other types of epilepsy as well. The drug, which contains a highly purified chemical compound, cannabidiol, found in cannabis, contains only trace amounts of THC and doesn't get users high. The FDA's website says it's aware of considerable interest in using marijuana to try and treat other medical conditions, and the British drug maker is testing CBD treatments for disorders, including schizophrenia. Lillian Wu, Fox News.
An immigration attorney and policy analyst does not believe the Democrats are going to be willing to pass any immigration legislation during the 2018 election cycle. More from Chad Groening.
Last week, House Speaker Paul Ryan canceled votes on his immigration compromise bill because it faced certain defeat. And the vote on his so-called moderate bill was postponed after the bill sponsored by Congressman Bob Goodlatte that contained more robust border enforcement was defeated by a 231 to 193 vote. President Trump told lawmakers to, quote, stop wasting their time on immigration legislation until after the November midterm elections. Art Arthur is a resident fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. He says that's what the Democrats want.
I don't anticipate that there will be any Democratic votes for that particular bill. I think they simply want to use the DACA population as a talking point in the next election, and they don't really care about resolving the issue for those individuals who are currently covered by DACA.
But Arthur does not think the American people are going to be fooled by the Democrats' strategy.
I think that the Democrats may be encouraged to overplay their hand by the mass media support that they've received with respect to the issue of parents and children.
And Trump tweeted Friday that voters need to elect more Republicans. He called Democrats obstructionists and accused them of not caring about border security. I'm Chad Groening.
And American consumers lost a bit of their optimism in June The Conference Board says its Consumer Confidence Index slipped this month to 126.4. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Exposing Washington reveals the deception that plagues our nation's capital.
The mainstream media refuses to tell the truth of what's really happening.
Exposing Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman brings you the inside scoop of what's happening in our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
If a recession is what it takes to make Donald Trump not so cute anymore, then bring it on. Just think of this as sanctions against ourselves. Although, again, I can't really make a recession happen, even with my $100 million.
I have not called for the harm of anybody. This president has lied again.
In a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station.
I have no intention of pretending everything's all right.
You tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
I strongly disagree with those who advocate harassing folks if they don't agree with you.
God is on our side.
No one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American.
This president will try to do everything to divert our attention.
This is a descent of America into tribalism, and this is dangerous.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. We will take calls, by the way, the last half hour of the program, so save them up. Bottom of this hour, we will begin to take your calls, want to deliver content, get these winnable war moments out on the table. Now we want to turn our attention to some sound bites. Just to close the loop on the environmental issue from the last segment, I've got another article here from Climate Depot. It's actually from the Institute for Energy Research. Again, talking about the failed prognostications from 30 years ago. Remember, we had environmentalists 30 years ago making all of these catastrophically Armageddon-like predictions about what would happen if we didn't get about the business of restraining CO2 emissions right now. Here's what Philip Shabakoff said in the New York Times on June 24, 1988. If the current pace of the buildup of these gases continues, the effect is likely to be a warming of 3 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit between the year 2025 to 2050. The rise in global temperature is predicted to cause sea levels to rise by 1 to 4 feet by the middle of the next century. Now, so let's say that we'd be supposed to be about 6 degrees warmer. At the 30-year mark, the increase is about 1 degree, and it's largely holding. Remember, very little, if any, global warming since the year 2000. So this catastrophic global warming, that hasn't come true. Sea level rise. Let's see. The rate of sea level rise during the period from 1925 to 1960 is as large as the rate of sea level rise the past few decades. Human emissions of CO2 mostly grew after 1950, so humans don't seem to be to blame for the early 20th century sea level rise, nor for the sea level rise in the 19th and late 18th century. So there's a little tiny bit of sea level rise. CO2 has got nothing to do with it, even though Gore said in 2006, remember his documentary, sea levels were going to rise by 20 feet.
Yeah, we knew that one wasn't going to come true when Al Gore bought that $1 million mansion right on the
on the
ocean.
Beach.
Yeah.
So he was predicting that my new mansion is going to be 10 feet underwater here in about 10 years, but he went ahead and bought it anyway. Don't do as I say, do as I do. So anyway, another article, how the prognostications, the predictions from 30 years ago simply have not come true. Now let's turn our attention and talk a little bit about the immigration issue. Let's take a clip number one. This is Fareed Zakaria from CNN. He's got a program called GPS 340 or something like that. Anyway, he's talking about illegal immigration, and Fareed Zakaria, every once in a while, he stumbles into some actual journalism, and he says here, look, and I don't even think Trump's lost. He thinks Trump has lost this battle over immigration. I don't think he has. Poll numbers continue to go up. The number of people who support what he's doing on immigration continues to go up. So this whole effort by the media to try to demonize him on immigration is not working. But Fareed Zakaria says, look, there's another issue that the left needs to take note of. Trump may be winning the entire war while you are hooting and hollering about what's going on the border today. Let's listen.
How does one define a nation? For Americans, political ideas and ideology have always been at the heart of nationalism. That's why being a communist could be thought of as un-American. But beyond ideology, there has always been, even in America, a more emotional conception of the nation. And immigration has become a proxy for that gut feeling. The sense that the country must be able to define itself, choose whom it will allow to come in, and privilege its own citizens over foreigners. In politics, people remember a few simple things. To illustrate that point, a pollster in the 1980s once told me a story. A focus group asked a man whom he would vote for in the 1984 elections, Ronald Reagan or his Democratic opponent, Walter Mondale. Reagan, the man replied. Mondale is a communist. The pollster explained that this wasn't actually true. The man replied, well, maybe. I'll still vote for Reagan. One thing I know, nobody's ever thought he was a communist. Donald Trump might have lost this round, but no one will ever think he's soft on illegal immigration.
You know, and Zakaria says, look, you guys on the left, you need to be careful here because immigration really matters to the American people. It is a frontline issue for them. It matters. It's right at the top tier of what they want to see controlled, and Trump is the one that's trying to do something about it. The Democrats are the ones that are resisting him and interfering with him at every turn. In fact, let's grab clip R2, Rob. This is the first time we'll use it, but you'll hear this as the program develops. According to the left, things are so bad that we have reached in America a
chilling low.
A chilling low. That's George Takei, the Star Trek star.
Can I hear that again?
Yeah, sure.
Chilling low.
Chilling low. Love the way that guy says that. Now, here is Bill Maher, clip number 2. And Maher, this guy is still rooting for a recession. He still is rooting for a recession. We played that soundbite a couple of weeks ago. He thinks the only thing that can stop Trump is a recession. Now, what is he admitting? When he says the only thing that can stop Trump is a recession, what is he admitting? Everything is going great. Mm-hmm. Everything's going terrific. The economy's on the move. People are optimistic about the future. Small business owner optimism at a decade or two high. So anyway, but he's still rooting for a recession because, again, he's so anti-Trump. Here's the bottom line. He is so anti-Trump, he doesn't care what happens to you. He doesn't care what happens to me. He's recession-proof. He's got his, so he doesn't care what happens to you and me, people who are not recession-proof. Let's listen.
Some things are more important than money, and one of them is living in a country that reasonably resembles the one that existed from 1776 to 2016. In a situation this grave, it is not crazy to use economic manipulation. That's what sanctions are. We pinch countries in the pocketbook so they'll act better. Just think of this as sanctions against ourselves. Although, again, I can't really make a recession happen, even with my 100 million. Recessions happen, and we always recover, but fallen republics don't. Rome fell, and they still haven't fixed that stadium.
That's actually pretty funny.
I'm not rooting for a disaster. The disaster is already here. If a recession is what it takes to make Donald Trump not so cute anymore, then bring it on. Because seriously, one of the problems with a roaring economy is it tends to make people put up with a bad president.
We will be right back. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The governor of Maine is bound and determined not to expand Medicaid. Despite 2 court rulings saying he must, he's not giving in. Although 60% of Maine voters voted to approve a ballot initiative expanding the program, his administration told the state Supreme Court that he's being asked to implement a massive new benefit program that the legislature has not yet funded. There is cause for concern. Enrollments have vastly exceeded expectations. For example, the maximum expected enrollment in Colorado was 187,000 people, but the actual enrollment for this Obamacare program was 446,000 enrollees. That difference is huge.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Today is the best day for you to begin planning for tomorrow, and the AFA Foundation can help.
It's just a tiny piece of your planning for the future. We have to live our lives as if our Lord and Savior is going to return today. But we should plan our lives as if it's going to be 100 years from now. We don't know. We need to be planning. We need to be thinking. Proverbs 19 reminds us that we will be poor for lack of planning.
A knowledgeable AFA Foundation representative will gladly explain the nuances of charitable gift annuities and answer your questions. Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Talking about the elitism of the Democrats, I mean, they fancy themselves that they are the party of the little people, that they're the ones that are standing for the little guy. They're standing for you and me, the people that have, we're working for wages. We're doing the best we can to save for the future. We don't have a big cushion, all that kind of stuff. And Bill Maher is sitting on a bankroll. He's made his. He's fine. He's recession-proof. You and I, we're not. It's going to affect us. We're going to feel the pinch. And he doesn't care. In fact, he's rooting. And then these people, I mean, you talk about colossal stupidity. These people are in there cheering him when he calls for a recession. It's going to cause their wages and income to go through the basement. And they're in there cheering for his call for a recession. He says some things are more important than money. And I thought, well, man, that is easy for you to say because you've got yours. Yeah. The rest of us are counting on a stable economy so we can provide for ourselves, have some stability, some predictability, and save for the future. Some of us would like to slow down someday and build a pension plan, a 401k, or whatever the case happens to be. And so we're not rooting for a recession at all. So let's go to clip number 3, talking about anti-Trump, how rabid the anti-Trumpers are. Remember, we've played sound bites from Jim Acosta. He's run into Sarah Sanders. He was yelling at her to get answers for some questions. She'd already let him have his questions and multiple questions, trying to move on, wouldn't let her. Well, he made the mistake of going to the Trump rally last night in, I believe, South Dakota or North Dakota, or maybe South Carolina. It was in South Carolina. And he was surrounded by a whole bunch of Trump supporters, and he's trying to do his report, and they're all shouting at him, "Fake news, Jim." Fake news, Jim. Here's how it sounded.
That's right, Wolf. President Trump will be campaigning here in South Carolina later on this evening. It is no secret he is going to hammer the issue of immigration right up until the midterm elections coming up this fall. And even with families being separated with their children at the border, the president believes this issue is a winner for the Republican Party.
But not a winner for CNN, Jim. Now, clip number 4. This is Elise Jordan. She is a reporter for NBC. So she's not for one of the lower tier cable networks. She is a reporter for NBC, one of the 3 major networks. And the question about what happened to Sarah Sanders comes up. And listen to what Elise Jordan says. This is a woman, again, that's supposed to be a dispassionate, objective journalist, just getting the facts and reporting them to you and me, so we've got the facts on hand so we can make up our own mind about what's going on in our culture. Let's listen.
It goes back to the anger over plenty of Americans know that they are being lied to constantly, and they want the truth. And should someone who lies constantly and enables the president's lies be openly welcomed in society wherever they please, should they face any kind of social or societal pressure? I'm increasingly weighing towards yes, even though I'm all about civility, but I do think that there are choices, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders has made her choices, and she has decided to constantly give false information from that podium to the American taxpayers who are paying her salary.
You know, I was looking at the transcript and listening to her bloviate, and she was talking about the Americans know that they are being lied to constantly. Well, Elise, we're being lied to by you. You know, NBC stands for nothing but counterfeit news. And yes, we are tired of being lied to by you. And who is choosing to give false information? Well, it's NBC, it's CNN, it's CBS, it's ABC. But, you know, listen how radical she is. You know, she's supposed to be a dispassionate journalist, but she says, look, should Sarah Sanders be welcomed in society wherever they please, she says, I'm increasingly inclining towards no. No, she should not be welcomed in polite society. Should she face social and societal pressure? I'm increasingly leaning toward yes. So Elise Jordan doesn't want Sarah Sanders to be anywhere in society, to be welcomed in society wherever she pleases because she tells lies. And, you know, you wonder how she would feel if we applied the same exact standard to her and her ilk. Glad I got to work that word in. That's ilk is one of
your favorites.
One of my favorite words. Yeah. I get to work it in every chance I get. What's that?
Just what does it mean?
I have no idea. Okay. It's just a good work. Just a good word. You know, you could use it in poetry. Rhymes with milk.
Yeah.
I don't think it rhymes with anything else, but you could put it in a poem and rhyme it with milk. What's it mean?
A type of people or things similar to those already referred to.
There you go. A type of people or things already referred to. I was just talking about journalism, and she's a type of that. So yeah. I was using that word, and it's correctly, linguistically correct, even though I had no idea what it meant. I guess it's just kind of instinct. You know, some people have it.
It's one of those words, when you look at it, though, it looks misspelled.
I know it. It doesn't even look like a word.
No.
So anyway, now, you know, some people have actually responded to what Sarah Sanders did. Democrats have responded by saying, we don't think this is such a hot idea. We don't think what she did is really a good idea. By the way, let's go back to the Elise Jordan clip just for a second. Elise Jordan would say that Sarah Sanders...
Chilling low.
Yeah, Elise Jordan would say that Sarah Sanders has taken journalism at the White House to...
chilling low.
Chilling low. Okay, here's Chuck Schumer, clip 5, and he's saying, look, he doesn't mention Maxine Waters by name, but he does say, I don't think what she's doing is a good idea. Let's listen.
In a country as large and diverse as ours, politics has always been a noisy, raucous affair, probably even more so today. And that's okay. But we all have to remember to treat our fellow Americans, all of our fellow Americans, with the kind of civility and respect we expect will be afforded to us. I strongly disagree with those who advocate harassing folks if they don't agree with you. If you disagree with someone or something, stand up, make your voice heard, make the argument, protest peacefully. If you disagree with a politician, organize your fellow citizens to action and vote them out of office. But no one should call for the harassment of political opponents. That's not right. That's not American.
And I would agree with Senator Chuck Schumer. And in fact, I would say that the antics of Maxine Waters has brought civil discourse to
chilling low.
All right, that's my story, and I'm standing by it.
That's perfect.
Now, Richard Haass, he's with the Council on Foreign Relations, and I know a lot of people on the left don't like it anymore. I mean, on the right don't like it any more than I do. But that, you talk about an establishment outfit, that's the CFR. And Richard Haass says, look, I don't think what's going on in our culture, with the kind of divisiveness, the kind of way that groups are walling themselves off from other groups, he does not think this is a good idea. And I agree with him. He has worries about the direction we're moving as a nation.
This is a descent of America into tribalism, and this is dangerous. One of the things we should have learned the last year and a half is we can't take things for granted in this country. Right. We should not take for granted the fact that this has essentially been a peaceful democracy, and our differences have never gotten bigger than what we could handle in a peaceful way. This is the sort of thing that makes me uneasy about some of the trajectory of this country.
And what he's talking about is the trajectory of the country. We were concerned, I expressed my concerns about the trajectory of the Southern Baptist Convention. You've got to take a look at what's going on right now and ask yourself the question, if this continues as it is, where is this going to lead? And Richard Haass says, look, I see the kind of animus, the hostility, the hate, the vitriol in this country. The reinstatement of Jim Crow laws by people on the left. I mean, they are running white women. I mean, it's not only racist, it's misogynistic, running white women out of restaurants and movie theaters. In fact, you could make the case that the liberals of today are the new Confederacy. They are the new Confederate Party because they're bringing back segregation. They're bringing back racism. They are bringing back restriction of lunch counters to people of a particular skin color. They're the new Confederate Party. They have this secessionist instinct against the federal government, do they not? California wants to secede from the Union, and that's all run by liberal Democrats. So they have a secessionist impulse in them, just like the Confederates. So you're going to hear that from me consistently from now on, that the Democrats of today are the new Confederate Party. And remember, they were the ones that are responsible for all the Jim Crow laws. It was the Democrats are the ones that wrote the Jim Crow laws and tried to apply them. The Democrats were the ones that created the Ku Klux Klan. The Democrats were the ones that tried to keep blacks from holding public office. The Democrats were the ones that tried to keep them away from lunch counters at Woolworth's a department store. They were the ones that filibustered the Civil Rights Act. That was the Democrats. And so that strain in the Democratic Party goes all the way back to the Civil War and before. And so I would say they are the new Confederate Party. Now, we'll save the rest of this for after the break, but we'll start taking your calls. So the number to call if you want to become a part of our conversation is 888-589-8840. That number is 888-589-8840. Give us a call, and we will welcome you to the conversation. We've talked about a lot of stuff today. We've touched some on the immigration issue. We have talked about Muslim immigration and the fact that the Supreme Court has upheld the right of the president to restrict it if he thinks it's in the best interest of the country. That's a huge win. Crisis pregnancy centers have been protected from being forced to produce messages that violate their consciences. A Christian florist, her case has been sent back to the Washington State Supreme Court. Supreme Court saying, look, you in Washington, you misdecided this case. You got to refigure your case in light of what we ruled in the Masterpiece Cake Shop. And environmentalists got a slap down. They're trying to shake down Exxon and 4 other major oil and gas companies for boatloads of money to build seawalls for non-existent sea rise. Anyway, any of that and more, we'll be right back with your calls, 888-589-8840.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki.
From Airing the Addisons on Urban Family Talk.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference coming up August 17th and 18th.
The list of speakers is amazing. We have Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, Stacy Washington, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Dexter Sanders, and we'll be there too.
There's a direct attack by the enemy on marriage and family, and babies in the womb are treated like political footballs instead of life. We want to encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family. If we can get our families on track, a lot of society's problems could be solved. The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is from Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. We've seen God open up so many doors for us to help serve and love those who get affected by a natural disaster.
As the trees and the wind started crashing down around us, my wife was, of course, very diligently praying, Lord, please be with us.
Very simply, we do it because God commands us to love others.
I see these volunteers all as a gift from God.
And I'm just grateful they're here, helping out. It's a blessing.
If you're interested in becoming a part of what God's doing through 8 Days of Hope, please go to 8daysofhope.com, click on Get Involved, submit your email address.
I've noticed that whenever there's a time in my life when things might be a little gloomy, the number one thing that I can do is to go serve somebody.
And I would encourage anyone else to, it's worth it. Come out and do it next time if you did make it to this one, and the Father will really bless you in it.
Thank you so much for your prayers and volunteering with 8 Days of Hope.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point. And Jeff, you're making a great observation on the break. Bill Maher says a booming economy makes it possible to put up with a bad president, but it also...
That's a sign of a good president. He's got the economy booming. Yeah. So, that doesn't even make sense.
And it also enables you to put up with a bad comedian like Bill Maher.
Yeah.
So, work both ways. All right, before we go to the phone calls, I want to play a soundbite we're talking about judges over the first hour and good ruling from the Supreme Court today. I think a lot of the influence being felt from Neil Gorsuch. These are 5-4 the other way if the Democrats had a president. If Hillary Clinton had been making the nomination, every one of these cases would be 5-4 the other way. So here's Leonardo Leo. He is the executive president of the Federalist Society. They're the ones that Donald Trump has entrusted with the responsibility to vet all of the nominations that he's making to the federal judiciary. He's doing a bang-up job of this. A lot of these judges that Donald Trump is putting on the appeals courts, for instance, they are young. They're in their 30s. They're in their 40s. They are going to be on the bench for decades. He could be reshaping the entire federal judiciary by the time he's done. Anyway, Chris Wallace, Sunday morning, talking with Leonardo Leo about his role in helping Trump find good judges.
The odds are high that over the course of the next couple of years, several years, you're going to see a couple of vacancies.
Better than 50-50?
Yeah.
If President Trump gets to nominate another justice, that will move a court that's often split over to solidly conservative. Leo has already helped get 4 justices on the court. He organized conservative support for Clarence Thomas and John Roberts and Sam Alito. But his role increased dramatically when candidate Trump asked him to draw up a list of potential nominees.
What you see in that list of 21, now actually I think 25, is probably the best and brightest individuals on the bench.
Best and brightest. So the Federalist Society has gone to work identifying the best 25 judges to nominate to the federal bench. They are the best and brightest, and by that he means the most Antonin Scalia-like judges that we have in the system. Now, Jeff Flake, this guy is a guy that's just out there trying to make trouble. He gets on TV because he's anti-Trump. If he wasn't anti-Trump, nobody would have him on TV. That's the only reason they have him on. They love Republicans that trash their own president. Jeff Flake will do that any day of the week. And now we show how petty he is. He's actually committing himself to stop Donald Trump from putting good judges on the bench. He's a Republican, and he's going to do it. Listen to clip 10.
I think myself and a number of senators, at least a few of us, will stand up and say, let's not move any more judges until we get a vote, for example, on tariffs.
Now remember, it only takes 2 Republican senators to vote against the nominee, and he doesn't go anywhere. If they have one that defects, like Jeff Flake, then that gives them 50 votes, and Mike Pence would come in and break the tie for the president. But you get down to 49, and there's nothing that can be done about that. So, and that's, again, because they didn't go to bat for Roy Moore in Alabama. They gave up that seat without a fight. Didn't put any money, didn't put any effort into kind of defending him against these scurrilous accusations, and so they got another Democrat on the bench, and now they're in trouble. And a guy like Jeff Flake, who is a nothing when it comes to politics and congressional. He's got his ratings at home are like 21%, and yet he can gum up the president and getting good judges on the court. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's start with Joseph in Mississippi. Joseph, welcome. What's on your mind? Joseph, are you with me?
Oh, yes, sir.
Yeah, go right ahead. You're on.
Oh, good to go. I was wondering if we're going to be voting for Christian candidates, then how does Donald Trump exactly qualify? I mean, he builds casinos and tends to rip off a lot of his general contractors and stuff. He's got a bad history. He's kind of not a Christian person, so I'm curious of why there's so much support behind him right now. I understand Mike Pence, and I understand some of his other supporters, but I'm not really sure about Donald Trump. I was just kind of curious.
All right, Joseph, that's an excellent question. Let me ask you kind of a follow-up question before I let you go. Who did you support in the 2016 election?
2016, I actually voted for Jill Stein.
So you voted for Jill Stein. So in other words, you would not classify yourself as a conservative.
No, I have differing views on all of the different issues. It just depends. I don't like to put myself in Democrat or Republican side of the opinions, because I think that just leads you to make decisions or support people that you don't necessarily agree with.
All right. So you're open then if conservatives have ideological problems, say with Jill Stein, you would be open to us criticizing her to you. And why would you support Jill Stein when she's virtually a socialist like Bernie Sanders? You would be open to having that kind of conversation.
Okay, sure.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that, see if you'd be open to the same kind of conversation going the other direction. Now I'll tell you very simply why I support Donald Trump. Joseph, just like you, I didn't support Donald Trump in the primaries either. I supported Ted Cruz. I was a Ted Cruz guy right up until he was forced to drop out of the primary and Donald Trump became the nominee. Then my choice as an American voter was between Hillary Clinton, who would promote radical liberal judges to the United States Supreme Court, and we wouldn't have got one single ruling that we got today from the Supreme Court. We got 4 outstanding rulings today from the Supreme Court on abortion, on wedding vendors, on Muslim immigration, on environmentalism. 4 terrific rulings from the Supreme Court we got today alone. We would not have gotten a single one of those if Hillary Clinton had been president. And Donald Trump campaigned. I'm just picking one issue. It could be a long list. But Donald Trump campaigned on giving us more judges like Antonin Scalia. Now, I'm guessing you weren't a fan of Antonin Scalia, but that's not my point. My point is I am. And Donald Trump said, if you want judges like Antonin Scalia, and we got one in Neil Gorsuch, then vote for me, because I promise you I will deliver you Supreme Court justices like that. Now, we could go on. We could talk about transgenders in the military. I support what Donald Trump has done with that. He's making an effort to defund Planned Parenthood. He has been a fierce defender of religious liberty. You go right down the list, and one policy after another, Donald Trump is fulfilling his campaign promises, and that's what I'm about. Donald Trump supports policies, promotes policies that I believe are good for America. Therefore, I support him, not because of his character, but because of his policies. Those are going to last a lot longer than his presidency does. So that's my answer, Joseph. Any quick reaction?
Sure. I mean, I disagree about how it's a good thing that people can get denied legally a gay couple can get denied. And as a veteran, I find the transgender thing a little offensive.
Okay, but Joseph, I agree. But you realize that's but Joseph, hang on a second. But you realize, Joseph, that's what campaigns are all about. When you have candidates that have 2 different points of view on issues that are hot button issues like that, then those become very, very important to voters. And they were very, very important to me. And Donald Trump took positions that I like. Jill Stein took positions that you like, and so you voted for her. The election was done, the results are in, and now we all have a president that we chose, Donald Trump.
I'm not saying that the election was that the answer was wrong or whatever. I believe the American people chose who they chose. I'm not saying it was rigged for anybody or anything like that. All I'm saying is that this man, as a veteran, doesn't represent my military very well, and he doesn't represent the people that I worked with for 4 years. So,
well, Joseph, he's making the military stronger than it's been by far under Obama. He's doing everything in his power to honor veterans. He gave another Medal of Honor award today.
He's doing it right now.
Yeah, we're watching it we're watching it live on television right now, Joseph. He's giving a Medal of Honor to a guy that was a hero in World War II. He single-handedly went in the direction of enemy fire, radioed artillery fire from his guys, from the Allies' guys, into the enemy camp, and was a deserved hero. Went there by himself, got down in a ditch, and was calling in artillery fire. And Donald Trump awarding him today a Medal of Honor. So that's a guy that I like. I'm a big pro-military guy, Joseph, and I like what Donald Trump is doing with our military. And I understand maybe you don't, but that's what elections are all about. The election is over. We've got a president. I like him because of his policies. You don't because of his policies, but that's what makes America great. And you'll have an opportunity, Joseph, to vote for somebody maybe that shares your values when it comes to the military and the issue of homosexuality in 2020. All right, thanks for the conversation, Joseph. I appreciate that. Let's grab a call from Edith in Florida. Edith, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes, hi, Brian. I told your screener that I've been asking a question and just keep getting ridiculed, and I was hoping you wouldn't do that, so I guess he felt sorry for me. Excuse me. I happen to think that there are way too many people who believe that they are entitled, and I don't think that stops at the border. And I was wondering, why can't the illegal adults that don't make it in time, to be processed, why can't they be given the court date and returned to Mexico to wait for their hearing there? They should have the choice of taking their children with them or leaving them with us.
Yeah.
I know that safety and security and survival is an issue on both sides of the border, and Trump promised America first. And I think that's what should be done. And I'd like to know your feelings and your honest answer about the possibility of having...
and I think that's an excellent idea, Edith. Give them their appointment date, give it on some kind of document, then send them back to Mexico, and then they can come back when the time comes for their court date. They can come to a legal point of entry. Wow. They can present their document that shows their day in court, and they can be transported to the court for their hearing. I think that is an outstanding suggestion, Edith.
I bet the percentage of people showing up for those court dates would greatly increase if we did that.
They're not going to run off because this is their one shot to get into the U.S.
That's a great
Very good. And again, Edith, another kind of dimension of that would be what the president wants to do, which I wholeheartedly support. We talked about it yesterday, is when illegals come across the border and they're apprehended. If they come across as a whole family and they're apprehended as a family, they come across as individuals and they're apprehended, we just immediately repatriate them. We just send them back to where they came from right now. No court dates, no judges, apprehended, turned around, and sent back to where they came from. Great call, Edith. Thank you. We'll be right back with more of your calls. Stay with us.
The most popular Christian single of all time, I Can Only Imagine, inspired by the death of Bart Millard's father. And 10 years later, it's still continuing to move the hearts of believers and non-believers. I'm Charles Morris. Won't you join me for Haven Today all week, a series called Beyond Imagination.
Haven Today, weekday mornings at 4:30 Central on American Family Radio. Listen online at afr.net.
What Solomon is saying here is, remember, God is in heaven and he sees everything. You are on earth and your vision is very limited. If you could see what God sees, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. That's what Solomon is teaching us.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Searching for Heaven on Earth, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Brian Fisher is my name. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to go right to phone calls. I just changed my mind. We have a delay that we use in case we have people that use profanities on air or whatever. You got to have that in radio. And there's a bleed-off time that's required at the end of a segment. Rob's got to bleed that delay off, and it takes about, 90 seconds, Rob, to bleed that off. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to protect the last part of this segment. Maybe we can use it for a couple of sound bites. Can you play sound bites while you're bleeding?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll try to save a little bit of time at the end of this segment. I got a couple of more sound bites that you're going to want to hear. But in the meantime, let's grab some phone calls. We just heard from somebody voted for Jill Stein in 2016. Let's talk to Ted in Louisiana. Ted, what's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, man, I'm so glad you picked up the phone, man. I am the biggest dino in Louisiana. I haven't voted for a Republican since Cleo Fields kind of stabbed me in the back as he said he was going to vote for some abortion bill that never went through. But I'm just wondering why did they allow David Duke to make the Republicans look like Klansmen? Because I think that was the biggest ploy that ever happened. Matter of fact, I'm no longer going to be a dino after the day. I'm going to get to turn in my Democrat thing. I traded for anything right now.
Okay, so you're gonna leave. So you're going to leave the Democratic
I'm
Party,
leaving
and
the
are you going to
Democrats,
become a Republican or an independent or what?
I've been a Republican since I can remember. I was really happy with George the Second, but our president now makes him look like a Democrat. I tell you, man, I'm so glad we're draining this swamp. And if you look at it, everybody that was in the movement with Martin Luther King and Lincoln and everybody, they were all Republicans. And I don't know why I'm put off so long, but I'm finally going to go and switch over, man, because this is just getting on my nerves.
All right, and so Ted, I want to be sure.
Rescue and everything else.
All right, I want to be sure I understand what you're saying, Ted. You're saying that you like Donald Trump, and you like the direction he's taking things.
I love my president.
What's that?
Huh?
I
love my president.
Okay, good. All right, that's what's under your say. All right, Ted, I appreciate that. Thank you for the call. Let's grab a call from Rose in Arkansas. And with Ted, you're seeing, the fact that Donald Trump is enthusing people. He's exciting people, and the Democrats have nobody that's lighting a fuse under anybody out there. And Donald Trump, President Clump, as Elijah Cummings called him, people get excited when Trump comes into town, does a rally. They get excited, they get pumped. He's energizing the entire Republican Party. Okay, Rose in Arkansas. Rose, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. I voted for Ted Cruz, too.
Good
and
for
I
you.
had to choose. So, but anyways, my thing is I want to mention a couple things, and I'll let you go.
Okay.
The thing about Maxine Waters, she is going to spark a civil war. She just planted the seed to all the people that listen to her. They're going to do what she wants them to do because that's in their hearts. That's what that's what they want. They want to fight, and it just drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well,
and the other thing is about. Go ahead.
Good. No, you go ahead.
And the thing about the abortion, and I so hope that there's somebody listening to me right now because I had an abortion when I was 19 years old. And when you go get an abortion, they don't tell you that it's a child. They tell you it's just a glob of tissue. When you go in there, there's nothing on the walls. It's all just white walls. There's no pamphlets. There's nothing on the tables. But let me tell you, it does not go away. When you get that abortion, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to move on. You can't move on. It's always there in the back of your mind that you've killed your own child. Yes, you can be forgiven. Yes, I've been forgiven, and praise God, I've been forgiven. And I believe I'm going to see my child one day. But the people that do the abortions, they do this on purpose because it's their business. They make money off of murder. It just drives me crazy. This whole mess is just a mess. I just praise God that you're doing what you're doing, Brian. I appreciate you very much.
Okay, thank you, Rose. I appreciate it, and thank you for your personal testimony. And Father, we do want to pray right now. We know that there are people listening to us right now, young women that are considering right now the option of abortion, or they may get into a situation where they do. I pray that you will remind them of what Rose said. It never goes away. The impact never leaves you. I pray that you will work in their hearts to protect them from doing something that they cannot undo and that will harm them for life. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. And Steve King was saying the same thing. He says, look, America's headed toward a civil war, and he was responding in part to what Maxine Waters is doing, to the Occupy folks that are camping out in front of Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Portland, stopped the whole business there. He said it's like Harper's Ferry, and then next we're going to have Fort Sumter. So number of people now thinking maybe we're headed in a really, really dangerous direction. All right, Jared, let's go to Jared in Georgia. Jared, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment real quick, Brian, about the immigration stuff again. Several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, my wife and I adopted a little boy from China. And before you leave China with your child, they make you go through a series of medical screenings. Your child has to go through these. And when our child went through those screenings, he came up positive for tuberculosis, which they were concerned was a multi-drug resistant strain of tuberculosis. At that point, the CDC was notified, and we were prevented from coming home until he could come up with a positive test, or negative test, rather. And my question, I guess, regarding immigration is, where is the CDC with these people that are flooding across the border? Why are they allowed to bring their children in and flood in, and everybody supports that? But yet myself and other families who've run into the same problem are prevented from bringing our own children home because of something that the CDC said was dangerous to our population.
Well, it's a very good question, and I'll tell you, we used to have a law, which is a good law, Jared, that you could not come into the country at all if you were carrying a communicable disease. If you had any kind of disease that could be communicated, that could be transmitted from one person to the next, and you were a carrier of that disease, you were not permitted to enter this country. Well, that's exactly what HIV is. And so people were tested for various diseases, just like your child was. And if the tests came back negative, you were not allowed to immigrate. That's what Ellis Island was all about. Ellis Island was a screening center for communicable diseases. So again, you're right, Jared, that what was done to your child was done for a good reason, to try to protect the health of the American public. But we ought to be doing the same thing with everybody that comes into our country, legal or illegal. We apprehend them, and if they're going to be released in our culture, well, they shouldn't be if they're illegal, but if they happen to be, they should be tested for exactly the same. There's all kinds of exotic tropical diseases, Jared, that are making a comeback in the United States because we are not screening illegal aliens at all for communicable diseases. All right, Jared, good call. Thank you for that. Grab a call from John. This will be the last call of the hour. John in Arkansas, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian. I'm going to make a quick comment about the veteran that was on just a little bit ago about, Trump versus Obama.
Yeah, we're not sure. I'll tell you, John, we're not sure that guy was actually a veteran. We have our doubts, but
I don't think he is either. My grandfather was a Marine, and he was the first wave to hit the beach in Iwo Jima. I have an older brother that served in Vietnam as a Marine. I have another older brother that was in the Air Force, and I served in the Navy. I was the fortunate one that when I served, there was no, wars going on. So, I don't know what that guy was smoking, but, my son-in-law served in Iraq during the Obama term, and let me tell you, the things that he would come home and tell me about the people that he worked with and what he saw and what he heard morale-wise and everything else during Obama's term was basically what you have said over and over and over again for, past 8 years that he was in there, is that his main job was to tear our military down. Now, do I approve with everything that Trump says? Because sometimes he says things he shouldn't. No, I don't agree with him. Did I vote for him? Yes, I did. And he is doing a good job as far as what I think about our military. And that's all I got to say. And I appreciate what you do. God bless you.
All right. Thank you, John, very much. And thank you for your service and your family. What a great lineage of people wearing the uniform, willing to take risks in order to protect our safety and security. Thank you, John. Great call to finish our calls on. Let's play one more soundbite. Let's go to clip number 8. This is Alan Dershowitz talking about the Mueller investigation, the FBI investigation, and where the real collusion can be found. Let's listen.
There's no question that tweet or that message saying we will stop, that sounds like an attempt to interfere with an election by members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a person who has a particularly high role in the FBI. Even if he didn't mean it, saying something like that he would stop the election. Look, I try to stop the election of President Trump by voting for Hillary Clinton, by contributing to Hillary Clinton. That's a legitimate way of trying to prevent his election. But when the FBI agent says he's going to stop it, that sounds like collusion at the highest level and an attempt to improperly interfere with a legitimate election. Congress is entitled to know everything about that in real time. And I'm not satisfied with the excuses they gave for not turning over that very important communication about stopping the election of President Trump.
All right, there's Alan Dershowitz, the real collusion in the FBI, in the Department of Justice, the collusion to stop Donald Trump from being elected president. That's where your real collusion is. Ladies and gentlemen, do bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap where God has placed you, and never forget, example after example after example, today we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
You only want to donate to biblical